Everyone knows the world's most famous dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus rex. For decades, this gigantic predator has captured our imagination and sent shivers down our spines. But did you know that the story of Tyrannosaurs began millions of years before T-Rex ever walked the earth? Long before the king appeared, its ancestors were small, lightly built hunters, and some of them even had feathers. In this video, you'll discover the complete story of the Tyrannosaurs. To understand where Tyrannosaurs came from, we need to travel back more than 165 million years, deep into the Middle Jurassic period. The world at this time looked nothing like the one T-Rex would eventually inherit. The continents were still drifting apart, the climate was warm and humid, and the dominant predators were not tyrannosaurs at all, they were large theropods from entirely different lineages. Tyrannosaurs, at this early stage, were bit players in a world ruled by others. One of the earliest known members of the Tyrannosaur lineage is Proceratosaurus, discovered in England and dating to roughly 166 million years ago. At around 3 meters in length, about the size of a large dog, Proceratosaurus was a far cry from the colossal predator its descendants would become. Its skull bore a small nasal crest, giving it a distinctive appearance, and its body was slender and lightweight. Proceratosaurus was almost certainly an agile, active hunter, pursuing small prey through the forests and floodplains of Jurassic Europe. Around the same time, on the other side of the Tethys Sea, a closely related animal called Kileskus was living in what is now Siberia. Its fragmentary remains tell us that tyrannosaurs were already spreading across the northern landmasses during the Middle Jurassic, quietly diversifying while larger predators took the spotlight. Perhaps no early tyrannosaur has captured public attention quite like Guanlong, discovered in the Xinjiang region of China in 2006. Living around 160 million years ago, Guanlong was approximately 3.5 meters long and is best known for its spectacular cranial crest, a thin, fragile structure almost certainly used for display rather than combat. The discovery of Guanlong was a landmark moment in paleontology, because it confirmed that the earliest tyrannosaurs were gracile, long-armed predators that bore almost no resemblance to the behemoths they would eventually evolve into. Guanlong lived in the shadow of Yanquinosaurus, a much larger theropod from the same formation, and this ecological picture would define the tyrannosaur story for tens of millions of years, small, opportunistic hunters surviving beneath the notice of more dominant predators. By the early Cretaceous, tyrannosaurs had spread further and were slowly beginning to diversify in new directions. Dilong, from China and dating to around 126 million years ago, provided one of the most exciting discoveries in recent paleontological history, direct fossil evidence of feathers. Dilong's remains preserve clear traces of filamentous proto-feathers covering parts of its body, confirming what many scientists had long suspected, that early tyrannosaurs were feathered animals. At roughly 1.6 meters in length, Dilong was essentially a feathered predator the size of a turkey, using speed and agility rather than brute force to catch its prey. Even more dramatic evidence came with the discovery of Yutyrannus in 2012, also from China and dating to around 125 million years ago. Unlike the small, delicate Dilong, Yutyrannus was a giant, reaching up to 9 meters in length and weighing perhaps 1,400 kilograms. And yet it too preserved evidence of filamentous feathering across its body. Yutyrannus remains the largest known feathered dinosaur ever discovered, and its existence raised profound questions about whether even the largest tyrannosaurs, living in cooler climates, might have retained at least some feathery covering. Around this same period, Yutyrannus was living on the islands that would become southern England, a slender predator about 4 to 5 meters long with notably long forelimbs compared to its later relatives, a reminder of the ancestral body plan that tyrannosaurs were beginning to move away from. As the Cretaceous continued, the tyrannosaur lineage was undergoing important changes. Guanlong, from China and dating to around 125 to 100 million years ago, represents a fascinating transitional form. Though still relatively modest in size, Guanlong already shows the beginnings of the deep, robust snout that would eventually become one of the defining features of large tyrannosaurids. This deeper skull was not merely an aesthetic change, it was the foundation for a fundamentally different approach to predation, one built around bone-crushing bite forces rather than slashing speed. One of the most scientifically significant tyrannosaurs of the mid-Cretaceous is Timurlengia, from Uzbekistan, dating to around 90 million years ago. For a long time, paleontologists struggled to explain how tyrannosaurs made the leap from medium-sized predators to the apex giants of the late Cretaceous. The discovery of Timurlengia helped fill that gap. Analysis of its brain case revealed that the advanced sensory toolkit associated with large tyrannosaurids, acute hearing, enhanced olfactory processing, sophisticated binocular vision, had already evolved in a tyrannosaur that was still relatively small. In other words, tyrannosaurs developed their extraordinary senses before they developed their extraordinary size, and those senses may have been the key competitive advantage that allowed them to eventually displace other large predators. On the other side of the world, tyrannosaurs were evolving independently along different paths. Apalachiosaurus, from what is now Alabama and dating to around 77 million years ago, was a large but comparatively gracile tyrannosaur that inhabited the eastern portion of North America, a landmass called Appalachia, separated from the western continent by the western interior seaway. In the west, the late Cretaceous saw an extraordinary explosion of tyrannosaur diversity. Bistaheversur from New Mexico, Teratophonius from Utah, and the magnificent Daspletosaurus from Alberta all represent the flourishing of large tyrannosaurs across Laramidia, the western landmass of late Cretaceous North America, as these predators rose to become the dominant apex hunters of their ecosystems. While the western North American lineages were filling out into familiar forms, Asia was producing its own extraordinary tyrannosaur diversity. Aeolormus, from Mongolia, was a slender, long-snout tyrannosaur adorned with a row of small horns along its snout, a reminder that tyrannosaurs could evolve highly specialized skull shapes even late in their history. In the same general region, Kileskus from China was another long-snout form, nicknamed Pinocchio Rex by the popular press, which showed that elongated skull tyrannosaurs were a successful and widespread evolutionary strategy in Asia. And then there was Tarbosaurus, from Mongolia, a massive predator rivaling T-Rex in size and almost certainly its closest known Asian relative. Tarbosaurus hunted the floodplains of late Cretaceous Central Asia, pursuing enormous hadrosaurs and sauropods, and its fossils have been found in remarkable numbers, giving us a detailed picture of what a tyrannosaur-dominated ecosystem looked like. In the far north, Nanuqsaurus, a comparatively small tyrannosaurid from Alaska, showed that tyrannosaurs had adapted to polar environments, living through months of winter darkness and cold in ways that speak to their physiological resilience and behavioral flexibility. And then, finally, there is the animal that all of this evolutionary history had been building toward. Tyrannosaurus rex, living between 68 and 66 million years ago across what is now the American West, was not the product of a single straight line of descent. It was the culmination of more than 100 million years of evolution across multiple continents, shaped by competition, extinction, climate change, and the relentless pressure of a world in constant transformation. At up to 13 meters in length and perhaps 8 to 14 tons in weight, T-Rex combined bone-crushing jaws capable of exerting the most powerful bite force of any known terrestrial animal with the binocular vision of a modern hawk and the olfactory sensitivity of a vulture. Its tiny forelimbs, so often mocked, were in fact powerful, well-muscled structures whose precise function is still debated, and recent studies suggest that T-Rex may have moved and hunted in ways far more sophisticated than the lurching monster of early popular imagination. What makes the story of tyrannosaurs so extraordinary is not simply that they became large. Many lineages of dinosaurs became large. What makes tyrannosaurs remarkable is the path they took to get there, over 100 million years of waiting, adapting, surviving at the margins, developing extraordinary senses and crushing jaws while other predators held the throne, and then, in the final act of the Cretaceous, rising to a dominance so complete that their reign has defined our understanding of what a predatory dinosaur could be. From a feathered, crow-sized hunter darting through Jurassic undergrowth to the most iconic predator in the history of life on Earth, the story of the Tyrannosaurs is, in every sense, one of the greatest evolutionary journeys our planet has ever witnessed.